Okay, so we'll make a start. So this evening, what we're going to do is I'll just give a little bit of a recap of the ground that we've covered so far in the course. Then I'll talk a little bit about friendship. So that's one of our main themes for this evening. And then we'll do some meditation, and then we'll do a bit of feedback. I'll ask you just to give a very brief bit of feedback on how you found the course. And just to let you know, we'll do breakout groups towards the end, unlike previous weeks when we've done them at the beginning. We want to have a break, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about spiritual community, about what we call Sangha, and also talk a little bit more about this particular Buddhist community. Then we'll just talk about, well, what next? You know, where to go with your practice from here. So I'll say a few things about that, and also about what we've got to offer at the Buddhist Centre. And then we'll actually set our own intentions going forward from here, and we'll finish actually with the breakout groups. We'll do a little kind of reporting. So just a little bit of a recap. So we started this course 5 weeks ago, and we were really looking at the situation that we're in, the situation that we find ourselves in, and the uncertainty and the instability of that situation. And how we also heard about how, in a way, that's always the case. Life usually has an appearance of stability and an appearance of certainty, but when we dig below the surface, we realize that actually, even if there isn't a pandemic, there's always this uncertainty, there's always this fluidity, this change. That's always the case. And we also heard about the Buddha and how he saw this. He saw that things were unstable, that we were subject to old age, sickness and death. And he knew that there was a better way of living in the face of that. And he discovered this path. He attained awakening and became the Buddha, which is a state of awareness, so a deep awareness of what's going on, an understanding of what's going on. So that's wisdom, and also a deep solidarity, a love for all beings. And the Buddha, because of his response, because of his responsiveness to others, he taught a path so that others could also tread the path that he had trod himself to that state of liberation and freedom. So what we've seen, hopefully it's become clear during the course of the 5 weeks through what we've been talking about, but also through the meditation that we've done, through the ethical practice that we've done, through the reflection that we've done, that the mind and the quality of the mind is really key to that process of transforming from an ordinary human being into an enlightened human being. So this is really, really central. The mind is really, really central. And we learned in particular that what we're trying to do in terms of the mind is make a transition, or make the transition from a reactive mode of mind to a creative mode. And we saw that the Buddha, in a way, represents the end point of that process of moving from reactive to creative. So if we're creative, we're aware of what's going on, we understand what's going on, there's a sense of a resonance or a solidarity with other beings who are in the situation, and we're able to be responsive because of that awareness and that emotional responsiveness. We're able to do things which are adequate responses. So that we've learned to do that, first of all, through meditation. So we've learned these 2 meditation practices that develop awareness and develop love, those 2 central aspects of the Buddha's awakening. So we've learned the mindfulness of breathing, which is particularly concerned with developing awareness, developing also integration, a sense of ourselves as whole and together. And also as part of that process of developing mindfulness, we've learned to kind of take ownership of ourselves as agents, as people who do things. And we've also learned the metta-bhavana, which again develops that quite directly, a sense of that solidarity of life with life, and how through that practice, we can overcome the tendency to react to difficulty with aversion and hatred. Last week, in particular, in terms of meditation, we looked at the scope of meditation, how we can enter into superconscious states of absorption, states of bliss, states of peace, even states where thinking itself completely fades away and we're just left with this bright, radiant awareness. And we learned about ethics. Like I said, we learned that we are agents, that we do things, that our actions have an effect. They have an effect on the world around us, on the people around us, and they also have an effect on our character. They make us the people that we are. So we saw how crucial ethics are, and understanding of our behaviour and how to be a good person, basically. And we saw that one of the ways of practicing that is by practicing what are known as the 5 precepts, the 5 training principles of love, generosity, contentment, truthfulness, and awareness. And then finally, we heard about wisdom. We heard that through reflecting on change, through becoming less attached to things needing to be a particular way for us, particularly by practicing the 2nd precept of generosity, we can begin to liberate ourselves from these unhelpful patterns by seeing right through them, seeing right to the heart of things. So we've heard about, in other words, we've heard about the Buddha, the awakened one, how he represents an awakening, the ideal of awakening for all human beings. And we heard about the path that he taught, which primarily consists of ethics, of meditation, and of wisdom. So I want to tell a little story now, just to enter into the topic for this evening. And it's a story from a very ancient Buddhist text called the Udana. So Udana means something like inspired utterance. So in this text, what happens is you get a little story, and then the Buddha basically says a little poem. So apparently, according to the scholars, this is a very, very ancient Buddhist text. It was one of the first kind of layer of text to be committed to writing. And this is what, basically the story goes like this, the background to this text. So I will actually read you some of the original text, but I just want to give a bit of background because it's important to the story. So the story is that the Buddha was living in the jungle, as he did, and he had an attendant monk with him. So the Buddha would often have somebody with him, another bhikkhu, a monk, who would follow him and be with him and be a kind of companion, and also arrange some of the practical things that for the Buddha, so that the attendant would arrange people coming to see him, or that if the Buddha wants to give a big a Dharma talk to a lot of people, that the attendant would arrange that. He'd tell people that the Buddha wanted to give a talk. He'd also, arrange, often people would offer the Buddha a meal, and he'd arrange for that. And he also kept the Buddha company. So the most famous person who did this is a man, a bhikkhu called Ananda, who, according to the tradition, was with the Buddha for 25 years up until his death. He was the Buddha's cousin, and he committed to memory what the Buddha taught. And a lot of the texts that we have are, the legend is that they are remembered by Ananda, and then he repeated them after the Buddha died. But in this instance, it's a different monk who's with the Buddha. It's this character called Meghiya, who appears to be a younger monk. And on this particular occasion, the two of them are in the jungle, and Meghiya decides to go into the local village to beg for food. So, as I might have mentioned already, in those days, the Buddha, and there's a whole community of people actually, Shramanas, who would live in the jungle, or they'd live on the edge of the village, and they would beg for their food. That's how they would feed themselves, how they would sustain themselves. And people apparently at that time were quite happy to give food away to people living this life. So Meghiya went into the local village with his begging bowl, and he collected alms food for himself and for the Buddha. And as he was walking back to the Buddha, he noticed there was a mango grove. Now, as you know, it's very hot in India at the moment. In some parts of India, it's like 45 degrees. I was only talking to somebody, a member of our order who lives in India, and he was saying that the temperatures were like in the 40s. So at the Buddha's day, it would have been like that too, and very, very hot. And a mango grove is a lovely place to be when it's very hot. It's got very, very thick foliage, and if you sit in the mango grove, it's very cool. So Meghiya is walking back from the village, and he sees this mango grove with this beautiful thick foliage, and he thinks it'd be a really, really nice place to go and meditate. So he goes to the Buddha. He comes to the Buddha with the begging bowl, and they eat their meal and so on. And then Megiyya says to the Buddha, I saw a mango grove on the way back to my village, and I'd really like to go there and meditate. I'd really like to practice meditation in that mango grove. And the Buddha dissuades him. The Buddha says, it's not a good time, Megiyya. Stay with me a while. And then Megiyya persists. He's quite a tenacious character. And he persists and says, look, I'd really, really like to go and, sit in the mango grove and meditate. Please let me go. Please sort of give me leave. And again, the Buddha says no. And then the third time, Megiyya asks the Buddha if he can go. And the Buddha says, well, look, what can I say, Megiyya? He sort of basically says, well, you seem like you've got your heart set on it. I don't think it's a good idea, but you're not going to listen to me, so go ahead and do it. So Megiyya, you get the impression he's a bit young and headstrong, goes off into the mango grove and he meditates. And he meditates there, and he has a really difficult time. He is assailed by hindrances, as we would say, particularly hindrances to do with anger and ill will and even cruelty. It's quite strong negative mental states. And he comes and he basically goes back to the Buddha and with his tail between his legs and said, look, I went into the mango grove despite you telling me that it wasn't a great idea, and I had all these difficulties. And then the Buddha gives him a teaching. Having gone off to the mango grove, the Buddha gives him a teaching. It's a little bit like it's that thing where sometimes you need to make a mistake in order to learn. Even somebody else telling you, even somebody who's enlightened telling you won't convince you, but he goes away, and then you can imagine that he's a bit more receptive to what the Buddha's got to say now that he's gone off and made his mistake. So this is what the Buddha says, and I'm just going to read you the original, it's a translation obviously of the original Pali text. Pali is an ancient Indian language that Buddhist texts were written down in. So this is what the Buddha says. When the mind's release is immature, Megiyya, 5 things lead to its maturity. What 5? So immediately we hear this lovely phrase, the mind's release. So in a way you could say it's another way of talking about a creative mind. It's a mind that's released from unskillfulness. It's released from reactivity. It's released from hindrances. So that's the mind's release. And released from delusion ultimately as well. So when the mind's release is immature, Megiyya, 5 things lead to its maturity. Here, Megiyya, a bhikkhu, that's a monk, has good friends, good associates, good companions. When the mind's release is immature, Megiyya, this is the first thing that leads to its maturity. So this is what we usually call spiritual friendship. It's friendship with people who have got a similar set of values to you, who are striving in the same way that you're striving. So if your mind is immature, that's the best thing that you can do, is be with good friends, good associates, good companions. Then he says, furthermore, Megiyya, a bhikkhu who is ethically skillful, furthermore, Megiyya, a bhikkhu is ethically skillful. He lives restrained by the restraint of the patimokkha. So the patimokkha is a code of conduct for bhikkhus, and it's along the lines of the training principles that I mentioned a few weeks ago, the 5 training principles, the 5 precepts, but much, much more detailed. But the principle is the same, that you've got these principles that you're trying to live by, these ethical principles. So he lives restrained by the restraint of the patimokkha, endowed with conduct and resort, seeing danger in the smallest faults. He trains in the training principles he has accepted. When the mind's release is immature, Megiyya, this is the second thing that leads to its maturity. So this is ethics. This is exactly the same thing I was talking about earlier. It's part of the threefold path of ethics, meditation, and wisdom. So this is ethics. Then he says, furthermore, Megiyya, a bhikkhu obtains at will, with no trouble or difficulty, talk that is sobering, a help in opening up the mind, and talk on modesty, contentment, seclusion, non-entanglement, arousing persistence, virtue, concentration, discernment, release, and the knowledge and vision of release. When the mind's release is immature, Megiyya, this is the third thing that leads to its maturity. So basically what he's talking about is good conversation. He's talking about the ability and the availability, actually engaging with conversation about things that really matter. So this is partly what we've tried to do in this course, is just give little opportunities in the breakout rooms and in questions and so on to actually discuss some of the ideas. So this has always been seen as a really crucial part of the Buddhist practice, is not just hearing things, but actually talking about them, engaging with other people on the basis of them, actually discussing them. That's very much part of the Buddhist tradition, arguing even over principle and application of principle. That's the third thing. And then he says, furthermore, Meghiya, a bhikkhu lives with energy instigated for the abandoning of unwholesome states and the acquiring of wholesome states. So in other words, the abandoning of reactive states and the acquiring of creative states. He is vigorous, energetic, and persevering with regard to wholesome states. When the mind's release is immature, Meghiya, this is the fourth thing that leads to its maturity. So this is actually the energy that we need to engender for making that transition from the reactive to the creative. So that's what the Buddha is encouraging Meghiya to cultivate. Furthermore, Meghiya, a bhikkhu was wise, endowed with the noble one's penetrative understanding of the rise and disappearance leading to the complete ending of suffering. So this is the wisdom that I talked about last week. It's the wisdom that sees the arising and the disappearance of things, that sees that there's nothing in this world that we can hold on to. And to hold on is actually to create the conditions for suffering when that thing is taken away from us. So what we're trying to do is live in harmony with this truth of impermanence, this truth of the rise and disappearance of things. So when the mind's release is a mature Meghiya, this is the fifth thing that leads to its maturity. When the mind's release is a mature Meghiya, these five things lead to its maturity. And then he just says one more little thing. He says, it is to be expected of a bhikkhu who has good friends, good associates, and good companions, that he will be ethically skillful. It is to be expected of a bhikkhu who has good friends, that he will obtain at will talk that is sobering, a help in opening up the mind. It is to be expected of a bhikkhu who has good friends, that he will live with energy instigated. It is to be expected of a bhikkhu who has good friends, that he will be wise, endowed with the noble one's penetrative understanding of rise and disappearance, leading to the complete ending of suffering. So the key point to draw out of this is that the Buddha is saying that all those qualities, an ethical sensibility, discussion on the Dharma, energy and pursuit of the good, and wisdom, all are given rise to by companionship, by being in association with good friends. So he's basically saying that the path is relational, that it's really important, that connection that we have with other people. So this is what in the Buddhist tradition is called Kalyana Mitrata. So Kalyana, I'll just share a screen here. So Kalyana means spiritual, it also means good, it means auspicious. It means a whole lot of things. It means noble, it means beautiful, it means good, it means valuable. So it's this spiritual friendship that leads to those other things, which in turn leads to the heart's release. So I've talked about training in the precepts. I've talked about developing Dharma discussion. I've talked in terms of transforming the mind and becoming wise. And the question, and this is something we're trying to learn. And the question arises: well, how do we learn best? How do we learn best? And it's probably true to say that we learn best from others. We learn best directly from others. Now, in the Buddha's day, this would have been the only way to learn the Dhamma, the only way to learn the Buddha's teaching would be to meet somebody who would talk to you about it, because there was no books, because there was no internet, because there was no recordings of any kind. To learn the Buddhist teaching would have been to learn from a person. So it would have been, in a way, more natural in the Buddha's day, just to see the truth that we learn best from others. Well, in a way, that was the only way to learn. These days, we can learn things at one remove from other people. But I still think we learn best from others. You see this with children, how the way they pick things up, you can see them kind of looking at you, and then you can see the way they repeat or they copy or imitate your behaviour. It's a bit scary sometimes with kids. We also, I think, learn best from others because it's always very well to talk about all these things that I've been talking about, generosity, contentment, truthfulness, and so on. They're very nice ideas, they're very attractive ideas, but until we actually see somebody living from those principles and actually embodying them, it's quite easy for us to just think of them as nice ideas that don't actually have a real impact or a real application in our life. So again, this is why it's so important to be in contact with real living Buddhists, because you see these qualities embodied, maybe not perfectly, but you see them embodied at least to some extent. So the example I often give for this is I for a number of years, I worked in a Buddhist business that sold giftware, and it sold it to make money for Buddhist projects. And at one time, it was quite a large company. It had about 100 employees, and most of the employees were Buddhists. And I worked with this fellow called Vilasavadra, another order member. I wasn't an order member at the time. And he became my friend, and he's quite an impressive character. He, in many ways, one of his particular qualities was that he would never slag anybody off. He would never ever talk about someone in a way that wasn't complimentary or wasn't true. He would never point out other people's faults if they weren't present. If he absolutely had to, he might reluctantly do it, but he wouldn't do it kind of willingly or definitely not joyfully. And I'd never seen anybody like that before, who was so kind of vigilant about not entering into that kind of backbiting, slanderous kind of speech. And because he was able to do that, and because I saw the effect of the way he talked about people positively, I realized that I could do that as well. And I in a way, I kind of upped my game in terms of following that particular precept about not slagging people off. So that's just a little example. There's numerous other ones I can think of where when you see these qualities embodied, you start feeling that you could do a bit more yourself. So that's spiritual friendship, which is a key aspect of the Buddhist path of training. That's really what I'm trying to get across. It's not just about meditation. It's not just about reading and reflecting. It's not just about ethics. It's got this profound relational aspect, which is intrinsic to it and really fundamental to it. So the Buddha gained enlightenment. He taught the Dharma, but he also founded a Sangha, a spiritual community. And basically a Sangha is people training together. It's friends training together. So when you get lots of friendships between different people and everybody is trying to develop and practice the Dharma together, this new thing called Sangha comes into being. And like I say, friendship is the basis of spiritual community, connections between people of different kinds. Part of the value, I'll just make one other little point about this, and then we'll do some metta-bhavana. One other important function, really, of friends is that we need to talk things over. So the principles, the training principles we've heard about, the precepts as they're called, are principles. They're just that, they're principles. They're not rules. It's not just you should do this and not do that. It's a principle, and it needs to be applied according to the particular circumstances of your life. So sometimes, for example, you might need to say something true to somebody that you know they'll find difficult to hear. So sometimes it can help to discuss that with somebody else, how you might go about doing that and when might be a good time and how much you're going to say. So, the precept of loving kindness, in a way, is in dialogue with the precept of truthfulness. You're trying to bring both into play, and you might need to discuss how you might go about doing that with somebody who's got more experience than you, who give you a bit of advice, or even just a bit of objectivity. So sometimes we need to talk things out with somebody else to kind of understand them better. So what we're going to do now, we're going to do a little bit of metta-bhavana, and I'm just going to invite you to include somebody who's been a spiritual friend to you. Maybe not in a hugely exalted way, but just somebody who you've got a connection with, a personal connection who's benefited you in some way. Ideally, someone who you've looked up to, someone who's helped you, someone who's offered a path or a perspective that's been useful. So yeah, so we'll enter into the metta-bhavana in that kind of way. So I'll just give you an opportunity now to set yourself up for meditation. So you can begin by just getting a sense of where you are, getting a sense of your surroundings. So part of our surroundings will be sound. So just noticing the fact of sound, being aware of its existence, and acknowledging that it's going to be part of our experience for the next period of time. And feel the space that your body occupies. And notice the different sensations that arise in your body which occupies that space. So being aware of, being sensitive to sensations in your feet and your legs. And the upper legs, pelvis, buttocks, the lower abdomen, the genital region. The belly and the waist and the lower back. We're filling your body with a kind of curious, kindly awareness. the shoulders and the arms and the hands, the neck and the throat, the head and face, both the surface of your face and the interior of your head. And the energy in your body. Notice the alignment of your body. So how are you holding your body? Try to be open and upright without being rigid or tense. Being sensitive as well to your emotional state, your mood. And just being aware of your breathing. And then bringing to mind someone that you look up to, spiritual friend, teacher, mentor, someone that's looked out for you and benefited you in some way. So I'm going to think of that friend I mentioned earlier. Just bringing to mind his particular qualities and also bringing to mind the benefits that have come into my life from my meeting, from my relationship with him. And notice what it's like to bring that person to mind. And wish them well. That well-wishing might be a simple expression of gratitude, where you can say to that person, may you be well. May you be happy. May you be free from suffering. May you grow and develop. And then making yourself the focus of your metta, directing kindness, directing metta to yourself. And saying to ourselves, may I be well. May I be happy. May I be happy. May I be free from suffering. And then bring into mind a good friend and including them in your metta as well. So you can say to your friend those phrases if you wish. May you be well. May you be happy. May you be free from suffering. May you grow and develop. Saying them at your own pace. If metta is already there, you can just deepen into it. And then just letting that person move into the background. Letting your friend move into the background. And just be with yourself as you are. Your body, your heart, and your mind, your thoughts. With however you happen to be right now. And then bring to mind something that you find difficult. We're going to miss the neutral person stage tonight and bring to mind the difficult person. And notice how that feels. And including the difficult person in your metta also. Again, you can use the phrases if you wish. May you be well. May you be happy. May you be free from suffering. May you grow and develop. Then bring into mind each of the people who've been in the practice. So there's yourself, the mentor, the Kalyana Mitra, the teacher. There's your friend, and there's a difficult person. So holding each person in your heart, in your metta, equally, so to speak. And allowing your metta to radiate outwards from there. You could start, if you wish, by including family, friends, people that you live and work with, perhaps, and then moving on outwards, and radiating metta, a loving attitude, goodwill, benevolence towards all beings in all directions of space. And then just sitting. So letting go of directing your attention and just sit. Okay, so welcome back. It's 1:15. So there's one question. I found this week that I was very drained emotionally and physically and only managed one meditation in the whole week in comparison to meditating daily in the previous weeks. When I am feeling like this, should I force myself to sit down and meditate, or do I listen to my body? I felt it may have been a waste of time if I was unable to concentrate and was verging on falling asleep. So I think it's a bit hard to say categorically without talking to somebody personally. But I just want to point out the value of continuity. So there's a value in just keeping the practice going, even if in a way it's difficult to engage with, because you keep the momentum going. To keep the momentum going, to keep that routine, but also you keep the momentum going of awareness. I think one of the skills of meditation is, and you acquire this as you practice, is learning how to meditate appropriately to the circumstances that you find yourself in. So if you are very tired, sometimes what you have to do is modify your approach and maybe modify your expectations about what the meditation might be. Actually, being in meditation and falling asleep isn't necessarily a terrible thing. You can actually end up being afterwards refreshed by it, even if it was quite dozy when you were doing it. So I don't think you should force yourself exactly, but I think to try and remember the value of keeping the routine going. But one has to be sensitive to one's own mind and body, and one doesn't want to push oneself into exhaustion. But I think you can meditate in a much more light touch kind of way. Even just sitting, it's literally just sitting and just being with whatever's happening. Sometimes feeling emotionally drained can happen because there's conflict within our mind that's not being able to be resolved, and actually meditation might even help with that. So I just wanted to say that. But having said all that, sometimes it might be appropriate just to sort of do something that's go for a walk, or listen to some music, or talk to a friend might be more appropriate. While participating in such a course via Zoom requires a lot of discipline and some preparation, mostly to try and keep kids from busting in, it is the only way I can participate at all, family and living abroad, and so I'm very happy about this format. Thank you for running it. I hope there will be some online events after the lockdown is lifted. Thank you. That's from Simone. Hi, Simone. Just to let you know that we are going to continue. We've decided to continue doing online events even after the lockdown is lifted. So we don't want to leave people in the lurch of either connected or reconnected through the online format. So we will be continuing to do things online. Like I say, we don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but we have decided to do it. And then someone's saying, I've been thinking about doing a course like this for a while, but I found it a bit intimidating. But doing this course online made it easier. Also, I don't live in Dublin, so I wouldn't have been able to do this course in your centre in Dublin. Yeah, well, that's great. It's great to hear that. I mean, in a way, that's been one of the real kind of unexpected boons of this lockdown, is that people have been able to connect with the centre and what we've got to offer, who wouldn't have been able to do that otherwise, whether through location or for other reasons. So yeah, that's part of the reason why we're going to continue doing things online, so that people who live in different parts of the country or even in different countries can access what we're doing. It's another question. By practicing consistently mindfulness of the body scan, don't you enhance also painful body feelings that you normally don't pay attention to? Well, in a way, yeah. I mean, in a way, the more aware you are, the more vivid life becomes, the more vivid pain becomes, but the more vivid pleasure becomes as well. So life does become more vivid. It can, in a way, become more intense. The advantage of that is that if we're aware of what's going on, we can be creative. If we're not, we're much more likely to just be reactive or be an automatic pilot. So it will make life more intense. But personally, I want to live life to the fullest. I want to experience the whole range of what it means to be a human being. And I also want to be able to be creative with whatever arises, whether that's pleasant or painful or boring, whether it's neutral. So it does. You get everything. It's a bit the opposite to depression. I gather if you're depressed, what happens is your ability to feel pain diminishes, but also your ability to feel pleasure. So your whole being just kind of shuts down. You become kind of numb. So awareness is kind of the opposite of that, where you're open to all the whole range of experiences in your life, but also you become more sensitive to the experiences of pleasure and pain in others, particularly through the practice of metta-bhavana. Someone's saying, hooray, can't do Thursday and don't live in Dublin. Cool. So thanks for the questions. I think that's all of them. And thanks very much as well for the filling out the poll, and also for the feedback that you've written in. It's really, really good to receive that. It's really, really helpful. You don't always know how things land with people unless they actually directly tell you, so it's much appreciated. I'm just going to share a little screen with you here. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the three jewels. So the three jewels, the Buddha, the awakened one, the Dharma, the path, and the Sangha, the spiritual community, are basically what Buddhism is. The three jewels are Buddhism. Buddhism is the three jewels. And that's what I've endeavored to introduce you to over the course of these 5 weeks, is the three jewels. So you have looked at the Buddha as being the awakened one, but also as representing the ideal of awakening, the ideal of human awakening. And the Dharma is teaching, consisting of ethics, meditation, and wisdom, and how we can begin to practice that. And wherever we start from, we can all begin to practice that. And we don't need to be a special kind of person. We just need to be a person, and we can engage with that. And then there's the Sangha, which is based on friendship, and it means spiritual community. It's all those people who take the Buddha to be their teacher and who practice his teaching. So the question often arises in introduction to Buddhism courses is, how do you become a Buddhist? So people are aware that in certain religions, like through baptism, you enter the Christian faith, you enter the Christian church. Well, how do you become a Buddhist? What does it mean to become a Buddhist? And to answer this question, I want to just tell another little story. This time it's of an encounter between the Buddha and a wanderer who is not yet a disciple. So you often get this in the texts, the records of the Buddha's life that we have. You often get these instances where somebody meets the Buddha. It can be somebody from any walk of life, but often it will be another shramana, another wanderer who is not a Buddhist, meeting the Buddha, and they have a conversation. And often what you get in the Pali Canon, in this old strata of texts, is you get stock phrases or kind of formula which are repeated. Sometimes it can be a bit tedious when you read these texts, but often the stock formula is expressing something really fundamental. And if you read it kind of imaginatively, it helps reveal something about the nature of the communication that's taken place. So in this particular instance, well, there's lots of instances actually. So basically the Buddha meets somebody, they might have an exchange, the person, the interlocutor will ask the Buddha a question, and they'll have a conversation. And often the person, not always, but often the person will be really impressed by the perspective that the Buddha has revealed to them, and the way the Buddha has communicated, the personality of the Buddha that's come across. And often they'll say this: "Magnificent Lord, magnificent, just as if he were to place upright what was overturned, to reveal what was hidden, to point out the way to one who was lost, or to carry a lamp into the dark so that those with eyes could see forms. In the same way as the Blessed One, that's the Buddha, through many lines of reasoning, made the Dhamma clear. I go to the Blessed One for refuge, to the Dhamma and to the Sangha. So this expression, going for refuge, is what it means to be a Buddhist. So you become a Buddhist by going for refuge to the three jewels, by going for refuge to the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha. So we're all looking for security in our life. This is the most fundamental drive that we have. We're looking for something which isn't subject to change, which is secure, which will give us deep satisfaction, a deep sense of fulfillment. That's what drives all the behavior of our lives as human beings. And you become a Buddhist when you direct that drive to the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha. So in other words, in a more kind of modern idiom, what you're doing is you're committing yourself. So a Buddhist life is a committed life. You're committing yourself to practicing the five training principles, the 5 precepts. You're committing yourself to practicing meditation. You're committing yourself to be more mindful. You're committing yourself to be kind and generous and contented and truthful and aware. You're committing yourself to waking up to the way things really are through reflecting on impermanence. So it's primarily a matter of what you do, not what you call yourself. So you become a Buddhist by your behavior, by the actions that you undertake and the way that you undertake them. It's not primarily about what you call yourself, about a new identity. The identity is secondary to the behavior. So when you do that, when you make that commitment, you do that in a particular context. You do that in a particular time and place with particular people. So, down through the ages, down through the 2,500 years since the Buddha lived, people have been doing that in different places. They've been doing it, first of all, in India, and then in China, and in Burma, in Tibet, in Sri Lanka, also in Central Asia, places that are no longer Buddhist, in China and Japan and Korea, all over the East. And now in the last 50, 100 years, the Dharma, the Buddhist teaching and the Sangha has also spread to the West, and people are doing that in the West. And what you get is a whole lot of kind of smaller Sanghas, a whole lot of communities within the wider Buddhist community. So it's a little bit like a tree with lots of branches. So I just want to say a few words about our particular branch of the overall Buddhist Sangha. It'll say, and I'll say something about the particular character of our particular community. So we're called the Triratna Buddhist community. Triratna means 3 jewels. So Tri is the word for 3 in Sanskrit, and Ratna means jewel. So Triratna means 3 jewels. So we're the 3 jewels Buddhist community, the Triratna Buddhist community. And we were founded in 1967 in London by a man called Sangha. So sometimes you'll hear him referred to as Bhante. Bhante is a kind of honorific it's a Pali word. And he's our teacher and our founder. And Sangha is an interesting man. He was born in London in 1925 and was basically conscripted into the army in the Second World War, and found himself in India in a signals corps. And after the war, he stayed on in India and stayed there for about 20 years, during the course of which he became a Buddhist monk, which is how he acquired the name Sangha. And then he studied with a number of different Buddhist teachers from different traditions, primarily the Theravada, and also the Tibetan Buddhist, different teachers from the Tibetan Buddhist schools who were fleeing. Many of them were fleeing from Tibet from the Chinese invasion. So he lived and got teachings and became friends with many of these people and many of these teachers. And then in 1964, he was invited back to England to help out with the Buddhist community there, and eventually decided that a new kind of Buddhist community was needed. And he founded that, and like I said, in 1967. Originally, we were called the Friends of the Western Buddhist Order and the Western Buddhist Order. So that's kind of cutting a long story short. He died a couple of years ago at the age of 93. So he had a very long life. He wrote an awful lot. and also gave a lot of lectures and a lot of teachings and seminars and so on. So all these different Buddhist schools that I mentioned, all these different branches of the Buddhist tradition, they all have things that they share and things that are distinctive. So what they share, what all these traditions share, what we share with other Buddhist traditions, are first of all teachings. So pretty much everything that I've been talking about on this course, you will have found in other Buddhist traditions. Things like the 5 precepts, practices like the mindfulness of breathing, you'll find them practiced maybe with a different emphasis or a different practical details, but basically the same kind of thing. You'll find something like the metta-bhavana in different Buddhist traditions. You'll hear about the 3 jewels. So those teachings like that, teachings on impermanence, you'll find in a lot of different Buddhist traditions. You'll also find symbols. So the symbol, of course, of the Buddha, seated in meditation, that's a symbol that is shared with other Buddhist traditions. And practices, like I said, practices like the mindfulness of breathing and the metta-bhavana, mindfulness of the body, you'll find them also in different Buddhist traditions. So teachings and symbols and practices are shared. You'll also find that there's distinctive emphases in different traditions. So different traditions will emphasize particular aspects of the tradition, particular aspects of the practice. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about 6 distinctive emphases of our Buddhist tradition, the Triratna Buddhist community, and that'll give you a little bit of a sense, a little bit of a flavour of who we are and what we emphasize and what we value in particular. So yeah, so there's 6 distinctive emphases of the Triratna Buddhist community. So first of all, there's the centrality of going for refuge. So this idea of commitment, of going for refuge, is really key to our understanding and practice of Buddhism. Sometimes what we say is commitment is primary and lifestyle is secondary. So what's really important is not whether you're living in a particular lifestyle, like you might be living as a monk or as a nun, or but what's really important is the commitment that you have to transforming your mind through practicing the ethics, meditation, and wisdom, through going for refuge to the 3 jewels by also engaging with other people who are trying to do that. So that's really what is at the center of what we're about, is going for refuge. And entry into our order, entry into the Triratna Buddhist order, which lies at the heart of the Triratna Buddhist community, is an acknowledgement and a recognition that your commitment is sufficiently deep that the 3 jewels are really the center of your life. Everything that you do, all your activities, the way you look at things, has the 3 jewels. The Buddha as a teacher, the Dharma as a perspective and a practice, and the Sangha as actual effective relationships right at the center of your life. And that's what our ordination consists in, in a witnessing of that going for refuge, that commitment by somebody who's like 2 people in particular who are more experienced than you. And they give you your name. So that's the name I have. Jnanadhara was given to me when I was ordained. And members of the order wear these, what we call a kesa. It's kind of like a symbolic robe. Oops. And you'll see that the 3 jewels are emblazoned on it. So you've got the yellow jewel is the Buddha. You can't see that because I'm sharing my screen, sorry. So you've got, here's the 3 jewels. Hopefully you can see that. So the yellow jewel is the Buddha, the blue jewel is the Dharma, and the red jewel is the Sangha. And they're all resting on a lotus, and they're enhaloed by flames. So the flames represent transformation. So that's, what the 3 jewels are about. They're about human beings transforming themselves into Buddhas. That's what the 3 jewels represent. So that's the first of the distinctive emphases, is the centrality of going for refuge. Spiritual friendship is also emphasized. So I've already talked about that. I've already talked about the value and the importance of spiritual friendship. So that the emphasis on that is not something you'll find in other Buddhist traditions. So other Buddhist traditions often emphasize more strongly the, as it were, vertical relationship between a teacher and a student. So while we have that in our tradition, we also value and emphasize the importance of friendships between people who are at a similar level. So we also value that sort of peer friendships, as it were, that make up this order that we have. We're also a unified order. That's the third distinctive emphasis. So what that means is that we have the same ordination for women as we do for men. So that might seem, in a way, not that radical, but it's distinctive because a lot of Buddhist traditions don't have that. They either have a different ordination for women or for men, or they don't have an ordination for women at all. So we have exactly the same ordination for women and for men, and it carries exactly the same status. So that's an important emphasis in our tradition and we're unified in that sense. We also emphasize team-based right livelihood. So I mentioned earlier that I worked in a business in Cambridge in the UK, and the business was developed initially to create funds for Buddhist projects. So we sold giftware, and the giftware we sold to raise money for, like, often it was kind of large kind of institutions that were difficult to fundraise for. And there's a big centre in the UK, which is a little bit like our HQ, and a lot of the funds that were used to buy that property were created through that business. So the team-based bit is that right livelihood is basically one of the Buddhist teachings from another teaching called the Noble Eightfold Path, and it's about bringing those ethical principles that I talked about earlier into our livelihood, into how we earn our living. So the team-based bit is that we do that with others, and we basically see that working with others is a really effective way of transforming yourself, because you encounter your sort of selfishness and your bloody-mindedness and all these things that you need to transform if you want to grow. So often by working with others, you can engage much more deeply with your own character, and it's also a really, really good way of developing connections and friendships with others. So that's team-based right livelihood. We're also ecumenical. So what that means is that we don't draw from just one Buddhist tradition. We draw from all Buddhist traditions in principle. So what we try and see what the fundamental principles of the Dharma are and what the fundamental needs of the individuals are, and then see what we can draw from different Buddhist traditions that speak to those needs and those principles. So that's unusual. What you'll find is most Buddhist traditions in the West will ally themselves with one particular Eastern form of Buddhism. So you'll have, like, a Tibetan Buddhist tradition, or a Sri Lankan Buddhist tradition, or a Japanese Buddhist tradition, whether it's Zen or so on. But we don't do that. We draw from the whole Buddhist tradition. And lastly, I'm just going to sneeze. We emphasize the arts. So we have an emphasis on seeing that in our own Western tradition, or any culture has its artistic tradition, and we can find values in that artistic tradition. Buddhism doesn't have a monopoly on the communication of value and truth, so we can start to see where that's communicated in other traditions and artistic traditions. And we're also trying to explore what it means to express Buddhist images in a kind of Western style, in a more indigenous style. So this statue again behind me is, even though it's a traditional Buddhist statue, there's a traditional mudra, a traditional hand gesture. The face of the Buddha is a Western face. So again, that's part of our ongoing kind of project, is how can we find indigenous Buddhist images and express that in a way that's more kind of local, rather than being something alien or Eastern. So that's part of our project. So those are the 6 distinctive emphases of Triratna. We emphasize the centrality of going for refuge. We emphasize spiritual friendship. We're a unified order. We practice team-based right livelihood. We're ecumenical. We draw from different Buddhist traditions. And we also emphasize the importance of the arts in the Dharma life. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about now is, all I can do really on this course is just kind of give a brief introduction, kind of in a way point you in the right direction. It's difficult to give a comprehensive introduction to Buddhism. That will come later if you want to continue to engage with the centre. So with that in mind, I thought I'd just say a few things about what you can do next to deepen your practice if you wish to do that. So I've just got another slide to share. So first of all, there's a couple of courses coming up. So the first course is called How to Live in a World on Fire. And really what that's recognizing is that it's quite there's a lot of very serious challenges in the world that we face, not just individually, but collectively. And we're trying to see how Buddhist ethics can help us live in a better way in that world. So we'll be exploring, for example, in that course, those 5 precepts, exploring them in a lot more depth. All I was able to do really is just give you the kind of overall gist of them, give a kind of an outline. But this will be about really looking in some depth into how you can practice those ethical precepts in your life. So that's 6 weeks long, and it actually starts on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday. So it finishes immediately after this course. So it starts immediately after this course finishes. So it starts on Tuesday. So it'd be a really good opportunity just to, if you're in the habit of coming on a Tuesday, which you are, you could just continue that for another 6 weeks and get to grips with ethics much more deeply. That course is led by a really good friend of mine, Vajrashura. So we've been working together now for, what is it now? God, it must be about 16 years, I think it is, something like that, 14, 15, 16 years. So we work together quite closely, and he's a really articulate and very committed person, lots of great qualities. His name means a diamond warrior, and so he's going to be leading that course. And then also starting next week on Wednesday morning, so a different time of the day. So this one's on Wednesday from 10:30 a.m. to 12:15 p.m. And that's a Going Deeper in Meditation course. So that's about the practice of meditation and how you can deepen that practice. So you've kind of got 2 options of follow-on courses that you could do. If you don't want to do another course, but you'd like to kind of keep a meeting with other people who are doing something similar, and you want to have a chance to report in on a regular basis, there's every Wednesday night there's a drop-in class. So that's tomorrow night. That's every single Wednesday from 7:30. There's a class. It goes until about 9:15. Is that right? Yeah, 7:30. To 9:15, and what we do in that class is there's a drop-in meditation, so a chance to practice the mindfulness of breathing or the metta-bhavana, and then there'll be some kind of input about an aspect of Buddhism or an aspect of maybe the metta-bhavana practice, and we explore that together. And so as part of that, there'll be breakout groups, there'll be different led meditations. So it's a really good opportunity, just have a weekly opportunity to plug in with other people who are also engaging with the 3 jewels. There's also drop-in meditations every weekday at 7:30 in the morning and also at 1:15. So that's Monday to Friday. So that's an opportunity to meditate with others. And even though you're not actually with people physically, strangely, it's really supportive to sit with other people on a Zoom call and meditate. It actually works much better than you might have envisaged. So I was a bit skeptical about it myself before this lockdown started, but I've really enjoyed it. We have a meditation that members of our order, and there's members of our order in all around Europe. A lot of people in India, a lot of Indians living in India, in New Zealand, Australia, North America, South America, mainly in Mexico. We've got quite a few people meditating. We all meditate together on a Sunday, and it really works well. anyway, so there's drop-in meditations. We also have a sub-25 group. So if you're interested in, being with other people who are a bit younger and exploring what the issues are and how we can put the teachings into practice, and also just making friends, that's a really good opportunity. So the sub-25s group. And then we also offer retreats. Now, we can't offer, for obvious reasons, residential retreats at the moment, but we are exploring a collaboration with one of our centres in London, and we're hoping to do an online retreat in August. So that would be a week in August at some time. So all of the information about all of our events is on our website. So that's always a good place to go if you want to find out about what's going on. Go to our website, and it'll have all the details there of all the different events that we're running. Oh yes, I've just spoken about retreats. Ordinarily what I'd be doing at this stage is really strongly encouraging you to go on a retreat. There's something about being on a retreat which is unlike any other kind of activity. You get into a particular state of mind, a very responsive state of mind, a refined state of mind, and you can really get to grips with the challenges and the issues in terms of your own mind on a retreat that you can't do in any other way. It's a very particular, very special kind of space that you get into. The communication that opens up with others is also really special. So I'd really strongly recommend you do a retreat as soon as you can. We'll be getting them up and running as soon as it's safe to do that. And like I say, there's this online retreat coming up, and I'm personally really looking forward to that retreat when it happens. Someone's just asked me, who has written these texts if the Buddha's teachings were mostly oral during the ages, and when were they written? So they, according to the scholars, they were written maybe starting about 300 years after the Buddha passed away. So they were communicated orally, which is why there's a lot of repetition in them. It helps to remember. And then they were committed to writing, and that happened over a number of centuries. I'm not sure that people know who did that, but originally they were remembered incredibly, because they're vast. The amount of material is absolutely enormous, and then they began to be written down, like I say, a few hundred years after the Buddha passed away. Okay, so I'll just sort of give you an opportunity now just to reflect for a couple of minutes about what you'd like to do from here. So I've introduced you to all these different practices and ideas. I've also talked about, different things that the centre has to offer. It's a selection. There are other things as well, but I didn't want to overload you with information. But just what I'd like to do is just give you an opportunity to reflect on that. In particular, with the meditation, how are you going to make? Actually, I've got a screen share here I can share with you. So what I'd invite you to reflect on is, first of all, meditation. So how are you going to maintain and develop it? So I'd like to suggest that meditating with others would be a really good way of maintaining and developing your meditation practice. That's one question. And then one other practice that you want to continue with. So I've mentioned, reducing input. I've mentioned mindfulness of the body in various ways. I've mentioned generosity. I've mentioned reflection. So one other practice you want to continue with, and one thing you will attend to keep you in contact with other practitioners. So again, this is the crucial thing that will determine whether you continue with the practice or whether it slips, is whether you stay in contact with other people who are practicing. That's just what I've noticed over the years, that the people who stay in contact are the people who continue to practice. If you don't, it'll just fall away, which is really what the Buddha was saying to Negia, that if you have good companions, in other words, people who are trying to endeavour to develop themselves, you are much more likely to do that yourself. So I'll just stop talking now and give you 2 or 3 minutes just to reflect on that, and then we'll go into breakout groups and just kind of report out about how we found the course and what our intentions are going forward from here. Okay, so I'll just set some breakout rooms going now. And it's just an opportunity to report out on how you found the course, and what you intend to do from here. So part of the reason for doing this is just saying out loud what our intentions are, and then they're much more likely to come to pass. So they'll just be short breakout groups. We'll just be in them for, say, 5 minutes. And then we'll come back into the bigger group. So the breakout rooms will just be 3 groups of 3. So I'll set those going now. So you'll have, you just have 5 minutes in the breakout rooms. Okay, so I think we're all back. So yeah, I don't have much more to say except I just need to answer a question. So you don't need to be a vegetarian to come on the retreats, but the food is vegetarian. So the meals that you will be served will be vegetarian. So I just wanted to just say it's been really nice meeting you. I mean, I've got a bit of a sense of some of you. I've seen your faces, I've seen your names. It'd be nice to meet you in the flesh. Hopefully that'll happen sometime soon. Yeah, just wanted to remind you that all of our courses at the moment we're doing completely on a donation basis. And we're really actually quite excited about the possibilities for developing what we're doing online. And we really want to be in a strong position to do that into the future. So at the moment, we're doing okay. We've been getting quite a few donations. People have been really generous, which has been fantastic. It's given us confidence to move forward. But I think what we're concerned about is how things are going to be down the line, particularly after some of the government supports are removed. So what we really ask is if you want to support the work of the Dublin Buddhist Centre, to give us a donation. We're a registered charity, but also the best way of supporting us is through a regular monthly gift. So what that enables is a sense of confidence moving into the future if we know that people are giving us regular monthly donations. So I really encourage you to reflect on that and just consider doing that. That would make a huge difference to us financially. Just to say that if you give €250 more a year, we're able to claim tax relief on that, which means that the donation will be a third more valuable to the centre without it costing you any more. So that basically is equivalent to €21 a month. So I just thought I'd say that because sometimes people are looking for an amount. So €21 a month would be a really good amount to give to the Buddhist Centre if you want to support us in that way. But just to remind you that part of the reason we want to do everything for free is because we want everything to be available to everybody, and for it not to be contingent on people having funds. So if you've come to the course and you haven't been able to give any donation, that's absolutely fine. But just to remind you that we really do completely rely on donations for all of our expenses. And most of our expenses continue even though the centre is closed. So yeah, I just wanted to say thanks very much for coming, and I really hope you benefit from what we've done, and not just benefit now, but continue to benefit into the future. So I'll see you all later.